Good evening and welcome to another exciting episode in the series of interviews that we're doing with who's who within the Barbados cricket setup. My name is Stephen Leslie, and today I have the honor of having a very important conversation with Mr. Henderson Wallace, who has been in the most recent weeks successful in becoming the newest member of the board of directors of the Barbados Cricket Association. How are you doing, Henderson?
Hello to all of our viewers. Very well indeed. Thank you for having me.
Yes, Henderson. I first will start by letting you know that you're part of a very high-powered group that we have decided to work and get some very interesting views on with regards to Barbados cricket. And I want to remind everyone and first invite you, Henderson, to let everyone be aware of that experience you would have had, certainly becoming the newest member of the Barbados Cricket Association Board of Directors. The whole process of getting up probably one morning and saying, well, I believe that I can make a contribution to Barbados cricket at this level, where you're the highest part of the decision-making body for the Barbados Cricket Association. How was that journey from the concept of thinking it first and then placing yourself, going out there, doing your interactions and canvassing, and then finally getting the success that you received very recently?
Well, ironically, Stephen, this journey, as we call it, started about 10 years ago. And this was when I was selected as chairman of the Barbados Selectors. And in my opinion, I felt that there was a disconnect between the players and the board, where there was a perception of the players that the board was not showing as much interest as it probably could, and I know that that was not the case. I think the board has always had the Barbados cricket and the players at the forefront of most of the planning and strategies, etc. But I remember saying to the then president, who was still our president, Conde Riley, that maybe that's something we need to look at in trying to just close that gap with the relationship, as I said, the perception of the players and the board, and making them aware that the board really cares about their best interests, and it's not just about the cricket, but the cricketers. And during my journey of 7 years being in the selection hot seat, I felt that at some point in time, if given the opportunity, I would like to share some of my experiences, give back something on the board. Yes, so at that point, then I decided it was best to observe what was going on. I shared the ambition and the ideas with some other BCA members, some cricketers, and friends and family, of course, expressing my interest to just go that step further and offer my services by way of putting my name in the hat, so to speak, to get the opportunity to be elected. So that in essence was the journey to get where we are now. It was a long journey, as I said, since 2012, 13, so roughly about 9-10 years.
Wonderful. And interestingly enough, Henderson, the fact that you were able to serve successfully, not just as a senior selector, but you've worn so many other hats, being involved in regional and international commentary. You also would have represented the country successfully at the national youth level. I want to invite you to give everyone like a background. Certainly, when I first heard of Henry Wallace, it was about, here is this exciting all-rounder who was extremely successful while playing for the national youth team. I want you to let everyone who's watching give us a recap of those very important years, and also dovetail not only the national youth team, but the fact or the role you think club cricket in Barbados has played and will continue to play in the development of young players as they transition from youth into senior level?
Well, of course, my journey, again, was a very enjoyable one. I always get very excited talking about it. I mean, it was some time ago in 1983, and I was blessed to play with a unit that was led by who was probably one of the best ever cricket captains in Dave Chief Cumberbatch. And I played with the likes of Milton Small, who went on to play Test cricket for West Indies, albeit less than 6 months after playing under 19 cricket, and Ricky Elcock, who went on to play for England as well at international level. So I was mixed with a good crop. I believe that there's still tongues wagging about that 1983 youth side, and many say that it was probably the best, comparable to Leslie Reefer's side. So, and that was quite a outfit that Leslie Reefer had at junior level. But that was just part of the journey. I was very fortunate to have a very good manager in the late Harold Griffith. And we still talk about experiences we had with Harold Griffith, and he probably went down as an unsung hero as far as the development of Barbados cricket was concerned and Barbados cricketers, because we learned so much from him. And a lot of what I learned from him, I was able then to take into my professional career and professional cricket career, because these things stay with you for quite a while. When the opportunity then became available to go and play overseas, it was a no-brainer, because I played at a time when all cricket was quite strong, all cricket being club cricket, Barbados cricket, West Indies cricket. So as a young aspiring cricketer, you relish any opportunity to get out there to play your trade. And incidentally, I came across my first contract, which was in 1984. And just going through some old files there. My late sister, she was actually my biggest fan. She had it stashed away somewhere. And back then, the interest was really about getting out there, not necessarily about how much money you were playing for. I know it's slightly different now when the cricketers are negotiating. The bottom line means a lot. But ironically, back then, it was all about getting out there and creating a network, creating a name for yourself. And that contract, believe it or not, Stephen, in 1984 was £2,500. Now, that didn't matter. It could have been £1,000 back then. It wouldn't have mattered, because it was just an opportunity to get out there.
Yeah.
I'm pleased to say that the club then, the following year, I had a 100% increase. And then the rest is history. I played for that club for 14 consecutive seasons. Then when the work permit regulations changed, when the UK changed the rules, and I guess the ECB was involved in that as well, I then was no longer eligible for a work permit to play in the North. And I thought that was the end of the era, so to speak. And I was quite prepared to return to Barbados and continue playing locally. But then I got a phone call that the Irish Republic had a completely opposite rule to what was in Northern Ireland. So there again, I was eligible to play. And praise be to God, it wasn't difficult for me to sell myself. I think the word was around Ireland what I was capable of doing. And it was just a case of the interested parties, whether knowing what I was capable of doing, whether it would have fitted into their strategic plans. So at that point, the journey continued, and that went on for another 7 years. And I was fortunate enough to be given the opportunity to be involved in the development and strategizing of Irish cricket, first of all, being a coach in the provincial side, one of the provincial sides, and then being offered the position as coach of the Ireland A side, which participated in the European Championships in Deventer. You know, a lot of the cricketers from that, which is meant to be the stepping stone for the full Irish side, to see a lot of those players then progressing, that obviously was very gratifying and rewarding to see that, you know, your contribution meant something. So I still keep in touch with the guys from time to time to see, well, I think you see Niall O'Brien now, who's doing ESPN. He would have been one of the youngsters who I was involved in that setup. And to see them all go on then to play, for the national side, it obviously was very encouraging. So, that journey was, it had some personal satisfaction from a number of angles, not just one. And the part I messed up there is I had a season in Australia as well, which incidentally started going on a club tour for a couple of weeks. And again, I probably impressed enough that a few clubs then were after me to stay on to play for the season. And that worked out. Then I played in the Sydney League for a team called Gordon, and which was just about the time when the wars were coming on the scene as well. So I felt as if I had good footing to return to Barbados and share that experience. And that's one of my things about it, Stephen, is that it's the knowledge that you gain, you can't take it anywhere with you. It's all about sharing. And that's basically my mantra, that I can share my experiences the best way I can.
Wonderful. I really am so intrigued by that vast grouping. I mean, obviously playing in Ireland, having the stint in Australia, certainly coming up, as you said, from the national youth team, and then you also identify how Barbados club cricket would have played its role in that journey. I'm really curious, Hendy, for you to give us a synopsis of how club cricket would have been, not just from the competitive nature of it, but the type of camaraderie, the imparting of knowledge that would have probably existed after a game where senior players, etc., would have been speaking with the younger players that were talented. How do you look at how that period was as compared to more recent times where, yes, we still have a very structured and organized club cricket system in Barbados, but how key do you believe those type of interactions and that type of engagement would have served to really have yourself and others develop over a period?
Well, permit me to go back to school cricket when the schools were playing against the clubs. And invariably, the exchanges were meant to be that the club size would annihilate the schoolboys. So I came through in that era as well, where the police teams would, you were supposed to be terrified of the police teams. And then you had the club size that were very strong. And whenever they got a school team, they felt that it was supposed to be a whipping session. Again, luckily, I played in an era where the Courage and Parry side, we were able to stand up against some of the best men's teams in the club teams in Barbados. And that was where the journey began, because we had a very influential and very inspirational PE teacher in Pedro Hines. And he always taught us never to back down. So we were prepared to front up against anybody. Now, courage is one thing, bravado is one thing, but you need the skills to back it up. And I dare say that we had the skills to back it up. And we took pride in playing for our school. And actually, it was very difficult to pull us away from the school to play for combined schools. But when we eventually did that, we had about 7 members on the combined school side. So that will give you some indication as to how it went. But the point I wanted to make was the importance and the effectiveness of the after game interaction. And this is the schoolboys with the club sides. Now, they talked about all sorts of things that we probably can't repeat on the recording right now, but there was also the cricket aspects of it, where a player was prepared to say to you, well, here's why I was able to hit you for 3 fours in the over, because what I expected. And again, you were learning from his experience. Yes, you would have had the experience on the field, but to have it broken down and discussed after the game, to me, was a very important part of the learning curve. And I took that through in my adult life. So even in my club life, that was part and parcel of it, where after the game, you had a synopsis of what went on, of the day's play, what we could have done differently, what we should have done, what we didn't do. And more often than not, it's going to end up into an argument because people will have varied opinions. But over on the other side was the opposition as well, who was doing the same thing. And then after a point in time, your senior players, so when I became the senior player at Pickwick, you would drift over into the opposition's dressing room, and again, the discussions continue. As I said, talked about all sorts of things, including politics, including relationship, but cricket was the focal point, and it was the learning experience because there were some guys sitting in the corner who were just listening. And that proved to be a very important part of the tutelage, so to speak. So for me, that's one of the disappointing things at the moment. There's no way to coach it apart from the fact that the concern is that club life is dying. The structure is still there with the Barbados Cricket Association, I believe, has been and is still doing an admirable job. But the club life now is the one that is really struggling. And I believe that's where some guidance is required because it's not the old system as where the community actually was the foundation and the backbone of the club. You have a lot of club hopping going on, and by that I mean players moving from club to club, obviously for recognition or for more playing opportunity. I dare say that if you're worth your salt, you probably should be able to hold your own in your local club community. But again, we find situations where players are probably looking for the shortcut and looking for the quick fix. So where can I fit in quickly and look to dominate? So I'm hoping that we can get back to that phase. And I always believe that the Barbados national players, the West Indies players, and to a lesser extent, the players who play professional cricket overseas have a role to play in this as well. Because I think these are the guys that bring back the experiences and share with their club mates who probably would never get on the plane or who probably would never get outside the Caribbean. Even if you were to share an experience in an airport in Madras or at Heathrow or wherever, that is something that can be fascinating another club member. And I remember as chairman, we always used to implore upon the national players, whenever the opportunity presented itself, we expected them to play for their club sides, because for that simple reason that I just mentioned, along with the fact that we felt your national or your West Indies players, national or international players playing at club level raises the profile of the cricket. So someone from the area is quite happy to come down the hill from Orange Hill to Maple to see Craig Brathwaite for Wanderers fronting up against Kemar Roach for Maple. You know, and that in itself, those little matchups can be instrumental in raising the profile of club cricket. So I think it's a holistic approach that's required, but those are a couple things that I think can help with the injection of getting the club life back up and running.
Wonderful, Henderson. And then that allows me to be able to transition very quickly into one of the many hats that you've worn over the last 30 odd years, and the joy that I believe it still brings you, that of commentary. I would like you to just give us an idea of how that journey was, because opportunities in commentary are not as widespread. Maybe if you were a player, in your case, you played for the national youth team, we have this tendency that, for example, but can you tell me how that journey was for you to first be given that opportunity to break on to that scene? And then more importantly, if you can identify maybe just one experience that stays out in your mind, whether it's at regional level or wherever, while you were doing a commentary stint.
Well, the journey on commentary was quite an interesting one. And it really started by accident, where I was attending a final at Kensington Oval as guest of the sponsors. And as I walked by, your good friend Andrew Mason asked me if I was willing to come and share some of my views on the state of the game. And I said to Andrew, as much as I would like to, unfortunately, I haven't seen that much of it, but I'm here really as guest of the sponsors. And I said, so I would really need to go and get the matter of that sorted first before I engage with anyone else. And he was sharing the commentary at a tabletop with Carlisle Best. And when I came back from the sponsors do upstairs at the Kensington Oval at the time, I came downstairs and Andrew reminded me that I was going to give a few views on the cricket. And he said, I don't think he prompted Carlisle Best, but he said boldly on air that here I have Hendy Wallace, and we would love to hear his views on the state of the game thus far, and I'm sure Carlisle would not mind. No, Carlisle was not prompted on this. And of course, Carlisle said, not at all, no objection whatsoever. And that was it. So I got the microphone. I had absolutely nothing in front of me, and I spoke about what I saw and where I thought the game was likely to go. It was not in the modern era where we had all the statistics around us. So Andrew had to get it from the table to go to the scores to get information. So I blabbed on and on, talking. The game wasn't playing. This is at the interval. And I'm just talking off my head, just trying to fill the air. Anyway, he saved me by the time he got back. And so that was it. During the week, so that was a Sunday, during the week, I got a call from Mark Seal at CBC. And Mark said to me, Hendy, we had some good reviews on the stint you gave at the final. And I said, great. He said, would you be willing to try out for original game? I said, sure, nothing to lose. And that's really how it started. I went and did the game with Guyana and Barbados. And I did the first 2 days. And I heard nothing more about it. So I thought that was it. And then the following week, I got an invitation to be part of the collaboration with the CBC and VOB. And after about 3 matches, I think it was, I then got a call from CMC asking if I would be part of a regional commentary team. And again, I accepted with a little bit of trepidation because at the time, things were not going so smoothly with CMC, but my legal advisors told me that the contract looked pretty sound, and they would recommend that I go, and that's really where it started. So the journey went from there, and then exposure came along from there on. So that is really how it all started and how it ended up. And the things that stood out for me, you asked about my commentary stint. Naturally, the World Cup final, which ended up being a bit of a farce in Barbados, where unfortunately the planning didn't permit that lights be compulsory for the final, given this part of the hemisphere and how light fades and stuff like that. You would have thought that it would have been a prerequisite. So clearly that was something that wasn't thought through properly. So that stood with me because I remember I was on air at the end of the game, and our director turned off the camera lights so we could see how dark it was outside, because as we know, the television pictures are not as the natural light will be. They're enhanced from time to time, but when he switched off the lights, that was really what I remember especially about that. So from my commentary stint, that has stayed with me quite a bit, how that game unfolded. And it's unfortunate that an anticlimax would stick with you, more so than something more spectacular.
Yeah, it is interesting. And I recall, Hendy, there was a big book which was very thick for that 2007 World Cup. Mm-hmm. All of the different areas that one was supposed to meet. And very interestingly, floodlights was not part of it. And as you know, we as a region, Australia were involved in that final. And then when they were going towards a victory, we were almost pitch black. I mean, I too found it very interesting that that we missed that particular part of the planning, certainly this part of the world. But I want you to just give me a feel now. Certainly you've been able to be elevated into, as I said earlier, the major decision-making group of persons, the board of directors at the Barbados Cricket Association. With your extensive CV, your experience, you're now into the policy making and decision-making aspect for Barbados cricket, which will impact, as you would appreciate, both the men and the women, senior and junior teams, and certainly be the pathway for us to have a competitive group of West Indian cricketers, both at the men and the female level. How do you, in very simple terms, envision or what would be your basic principles that you would want to utilize now that you're a part of that very important decision-making body?
I would say the recent connection with the players and obviously being able to be a voice for what was being felt by the players. Additionally, any injection that we can make, or I can make, towards the development of the grassroots program, because I believe that is very important when you look at your development. Yes, everybody likes to have a quick fix. Everybody likes to look at the finish line, but some attention, or a little bit more attention, probably needs to be placed to the starting line. And just remember, we're not inventing the wheel here. It's a case about trying to add what is already in place. And the Barbadian Board of Directors already have a strategic plan in place. And it's all about coming to add to that or to help execute that plan to the best way possible. So you'll be using your network, your knowledge, and any sort of influences that you have, notwithstanding your time and commitment as well, to get to that finish line. But as I said, a lot of work and a lot of effort is really needed for the starting line. And I think that some attention and dedication has to be placed to the foundation of any strategic plan.
Wonderful. It's ironic. We've been doing a series of interviews within this particular marketing and promotional plan for Barbados cricket. And quite recently, I did an interview with Carlisle Best. And similarly, Hendy, the wealth of knowledge and experience that you two gentlemen would have imparted and shared, it is something that is very invaluable in my view. And I say to Carlisle, and I'm extending this to you at the appropriate time, that I think that we will need to do a part 2 for this, because there's a lot of technical aspects of cricket, about leadership as well, that I really would want to be able to allow you to be able to express. In Carlisle's case, we've agreed for the art of batting and leadership, him being a former Barbados captain and a prolific batsman, certainly at club level, regional level. And we both know that once he would have been, exposed a little bit more, he would have been, I believe, a very prolific player at the international level. But in your case, Hendy, I really have thus far appreciated the conversation that we've had. And in the final 5 minutes, I want to go into an area which I think is bread and butter for someone like you, but really people need to understand the importance of that role that you played as a senior selector for Barbados, a successful one at that. Sometimes persons, when you don't hear too much about when the selection panel have been getting it right, but when there's this one dodgy, and I use the word dodgy in inverted commas, or questionable selection, you hear that the selectors must go, or the selectors don't know what they're doing. I want you to really give me a feel of what you would consider with the panel that you worked with as a senior selector. What would have been that driving force that allowed you to be as successful as you were? And if possible, what would you like to, because like in case of Mr. Henderson Rooms, he served on your panel while you were chair. He's a current selector who's chairman of that panel. What would you want to advise any group that would have taken over in terms of, managing and being able to do what you believe as a group is right for Barbados' cricket?
Well, I think the first thing I would have to say when you talk about the success is the autonomy afforded to the selection panel to do the job they were elected or selected to do. And having heard some horror stories of board members getting involved in selection, it sort of was very concerning for us as a panel. And I dare say that in the 7 years that I was chairman, not once did I hear from my fellow selectors of any instances of board members getting involved or trying to get involved in the actual running of this election. So kudos to the board members at that time for allowing us to do the job we were selected to do and affording us the autonomy. One of the things about being chairman is that just about every decision that's made, the fingers will point at the chairman. The patting on the back will go to the chairman. And sometimes it seems to be a forgotten thing that it's a panel that is making these decisions. The chairman is actually the spokesperson. One thing that we agreed on as a panel is that we would never vote directly on a player. And by that, I mean a raise of hands, 3 versus 2, 4 versus 1. Never once did we find ourselves in a position where we had to vote. And not because we agreed on everything, but it was our ambition to exhaust every cricketing detail to separate nominations. And my rule was that if we are split on a player, it would suggest that there's not a great deal between the two. And should we reach that position, I always believed that the captain should get what he wants. Because if we can't separate 2 players, meaning there's not much between them, then the one that the captain wants, he's the person that has to go and implement, execute, motivate, influence. So I always believe that once we got to that point, then the captain should get his say on that particular aspect of it. What I would say as well, let me get back to say that when we sat down, we set out 3 things. The Barbados team had not won anything for a while. We had 1 or maybe 2 representatives on the West Indies side. And we felt that the cricket was like, it seemed as if it was just meandering along in club cricket. So those were the 3 things we targeted. We wanted to raise the profile of Barbados cricket once again, get more representation on the international team, on the West Indies team, and see then to try and get something back in the trophy cabinet. And I think within 18 months, we were able to check those boxes, and we did all of the above. So it got to a stage then where we were having 6 and 7 and 8 members on the West Indies squad. The Barbados team then won the 50-over tournament. We won the 4-day tournament. And as I said to you earlier in the interview, we were encouraging the national players and the West Indies players to come back and play for their clubs whenever available. And all this resting that was being spoken about, we asked the players to just give a little bit more back to their clubs to help raise the profile of that club. So I think we were able to achieve that. So that too was very gratifying. What I will say to other players or other selection panels, the most difficult thing for me was to call a player and say to him, you're not going to be included in the next game. And then you suffered because you had that success at international level. Because with the returning international players, it was automatic for them to play in the national side, in the Barbados side. So it meant they had to make way for someone. So there were times when you had to leave out someone who had an important contribution in a previous game, right? And I remember having to make the very unpopular decision to retain Roston Chase, because at the time we saw him as a developmental player who had come in due to the absence of another player who had a bereavement. And when he came in, he made a century. Now, centuries don't come by so easily. So it was very difficult to explain to that player that in spite of the fact you did well in the previous round, the panel would like to retain the developmental player who did so well. Well, the rest is history as far as that player went. But that resulted in a fallout. because the player got very upset and walked out. They didn't want to hear. And you can understand the passion associated with that. But I would think that that player then, as time went by, understood what was being done. And players as well, when they're left out, feel as if the selectors don't like them. Well, not the selectors, the chairman. The chairman doesn't like them, right? And as you know, as a body, you make a decision. I come out as a sports person, but I cannot say, well, Stephen Leslie was for you, but Hendy Wallace wasn't. Collectively, it's a decision. And as I said, we were able to do that for the most part for those 7 years, where the good news was shared with the players and the bad news was shared with the players. And, you know, I would say to any selection panel, if you can keep that confidentiality along with transparency, honesty, and stay the course, I think that you put those things together could lead to a very successful reign.
Wonderful. And again, this type of transparency, I mean, that's how I sum up what you just articulated. It's really needed, not just within the board of directors of the BCA, but by extension within West Indies cricket. And because you've got so many different areas that you're trying to tap into, you want to get to the particular apex that West Indies team. We want it to be more competitive. We want it to be successful, but then you've got, you know, pulling and tugging, and it's just so much of an interesting dynamic. And Henderson, my final engagement with you this afternoon will be to wish you, as the newest member of the Barbados Cricket Association Board of Directors, success. And success meaning you were able to identify 3 areas as a senior selection panel that you wanted to take off, and you were able to achieve that, as you suggested, within an 18-month period. But you will see, and the experience of being in such a dynamic environment of the Barbados Cricket Association, that we need not only the expertise and the knowledge that you will bring, but we've got to manage so many other diverging interests and diverging areas to get to that apex. And in this case, I would believe is to provide Barbados, the Barbados cricket team, not only with success, but to provide Barbadian players that can go into making the West Indies team more competitive. And I want to wish you the very best. I will say to you that I believe we will have to do a part 2 again, because really the journey and the experience that you're imparting is something that I believe everyone should hear. And I'll invite you to give any closing comments that you would wish to give.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity to share my journey. And as you probably heard, I'm in the process of writing a book. It's been going on for some while, but it's just a journey that I would like to share, you know. And as I said before, the experiences and the knowledge, you can't take it anywhere with you. So if you can share these things, I think that should be offered. And I mean, the decision for those who would want to receive it is debatable, but I think that those experiences should be shared. You spoke about the apex, but again, we can't, it's not that kind of race. You just can't look at the finishing line. You have to look at the body and the foundation to get there.
Well, thank you again, Henderson Wallace, newest member of the BCA Board of Directors. My name is Stephen Leslie, Manager of Communications and Marketing at the Barbados Cricket Association. And we've been able to continue our exciting series of getting to know who is who within the Barbados cricket fraternity. I want to thank you again, Henderson, and have a good evening.
Thank you.